A Google executive involved in the company's top-secret program is found dead aboard his yacht, the Escape. Everything on the luxury vessel is neatly in its place except for 2 wine glasses sitting on the table by his body. Further investigation would uncover dark secrets and a mysterious tattooed woman quickly leaving the scene. The months-long investigation would shed light on the dark underworld of the super-rich and expose the deadly pattern of this unknown woman. Her name was Alex Catherine Tichelman, born April 8, 1987 in Canada. She was adopted by an American couple from Georgia, Bart and Leslie Tichelman. She was raised in a privileged home. Bart was an executive for a tech firm and was a talented poker player, even winning $400,000 at the World Poker Tournament. And she had a normal childhood, but she fell into trouble in her teens, getting introduced to weed at 14 and heroin shortly after at age 16. Her parents were concerned, so they enrolled her into a boarding school in Maine with a price tag of $50,000 a year. She didn't stay long and returned to Georgia to finish high school. She moved cross-country to San Francisco in 2011 at the age of 23. She had aspirations of being a beauty influencer, even starting a YouTube channel. But when that failed to gain traction, she focused more on modeling. She had an interest in BDSM and wanted her aesthetic to reflect that. During a trip back to Georgia, she met and started a relationship with 52-year-old Dean Riapelli. He was an established and stable partner. He owned and operated a popular venue for rock bands. He was part of a band himself and often went on tour. When he was home, he had a large property with dozens of monkeys that he cared for and trained. It seemed she had found a good man and a healthy relationship, but it wouldn't last. By 2013, she had moved into his home and the two openly discussed marriage, but there were cracks in the union. Alex had fallen back into heroin use and went to extreme lengths to hide it from Dean. When she couldn't support her habits strictly from modeling gigs, she turned to popular dating site seekingarrangement.com, a platform strictly for women and men to connect with a significant other in exchange for an allowance. It was an effective way to find a sugar daddy. She began meeting men for money behind Dean's back. As her drug use gripped her tighter, her relationship suffered. Her and Dean began fighting. On September 6 of 2013, she called the police saying Dean was getting violent with her. When police arrived at the club, they observed her acting erratic. Dean told police that she had taken her top off and was obnoxious, attempting to stage dive. He had asked her to stop or she'd have to leave. She got upset and bit him. Witnesses corroborated his story of events, and as a result, she was charged with battery and filing a false report. 11 days later, she called 911 again, but this time it was far worse. She was calling because Dean was unconscious.
I think my boyfriend overdosed or something.
Now that is the voice of Alex Tichelman.
He won't respond. And he's just laying on the ground. I don't know.
Okay, and are you with the patient now?
Immediately after calling 911 to report her boyfriend's overdose, Alex Tichelman hangs up on the 911 dispatcher. The dispatcher immediately calls back, and Tichelman tells her she's sure her boyfriend, Dean Riapelli, overdosed.
Okay, what did he take?
I'm not too sure. A painkiller?
Once again, she hangs up, and now she doesn't pick up her phone. The dispatcher calls back twice, and each time the call goes to voicemail. Tichelman told Milton police that Riapelli had been on a bender, drinking heavily and taking prescription pills.
September 17, 2013, Dean was pronounced dead. The coroner would ultimately list his cause of death as an accidental drug overdose, noting that one of the drugs in his system was heroin. Following the death of Dean, Alex fell deeper into drug use and went back to California, where she continued to pursue modeling and men from Seeking Arrangement. She bragged to friends that she had over 200 clients that were paying for her time. It's unknown if she truly had a client list of over 200, but what we do know is one of her clients was a man named Forrest Hayes. At the time of meeting Alex in November, he was 51 years old and incredibly successful. He once told an associate that he had more money than he knew what to do with. Originally from Detroit, Michigan, he got his start in the automotive industry and eventually worked his way into tech, working for Apple and eventually becoming an executive with Google in their secret program Google X, where they worked on projects like self-driving cars. He lived with his wife of 17 years and 5 children in a $3 million home, but Forrest had a secret. He was active on seeking arrangement too, where he would meet women and invite them to spend time with him on his yacht. According to friends of Alex, she had texted that she'd met a good one. Forrest was generous, and she said he wasn't interested in getting physical with her. He liked to party, and on November 22nd, Alex met Forrest at his yacht in the Santa Cruz small craft harbor, and she brought party favors. But the party wouldn't go as planned. The next morning, Forrest's wife grew concerned he didn't return home, and she called the captain that they hired for the yacht. He went to check the yacht for any sign of Forrest and discovered his lifeless body in the main cabin. He immediately called police, but there was nothing they could do. Forrest was gone. The investigation began immediately, and people noticed. The small beach community was concerned a body had been found at the local harbor, and police were tight-lipped and wouldn't rule out foul play. Because while Forrest was alone when his body was found with a fresh injection site on his arm, there were 2 wine glasses nearby, and both of them had been used. While aboard the yacht, police noticed how Forrest had not spared $1 in designing it to his liking. In addition to a leather ceiling and $8,000 captain's chair, he also splurged on security. He put over $200,000 of tech equipment on the yacht, including cameras. When police asked the captain about the cameras, they were disappointed to learn that they weren't working. Police were able to confirm their suspicions that Forrest wasn't alone that night when they recovered data from his phone. They learned of his presence on the seeking arrangement site and that he arranged a meeting with the woman the night of his death. Police were desperate for any evidence they could find because outside of the wine glasses and messages recovered from Forrest's phone, they had nothing. They reached out to the security company that installed the cameras and found that they did in fact work, and the footage was stored on a cloud server. 3 months and a court order later, they finally had the footage, and it was chilling. The footage was never made public, but police would say it clearly shows Alex and Forrest aboard the boat, and Alex injects herself first while Forrest watches. When she's finished injecting herself, she injects Forrest, although he immediately becomes distressed. Alex is seen standing over him before she begins collecting her things, stepping around his body before finishing her wine, drawing the blinds down, and leaving. During the investigation, Alex continued her life as usual, although police were monitoring her, and suspicions of foul play only heightened when she made a Facebook post about enjoying discussions of murder. After police discovered she planned to leave the state, they acted quickly, posing as a potential sugar daddy on the site. Alex thought she was meeting a man named Sebastian at an upscale beach resort, but when she arrived to meet him, she was arrested for second-degree murder, destruction of evidence, and transporting narcotics. She was held without bond. 5 days later, she had her first hearing, where she was charged with a total of 8 counts. Among them were manslaughter, prostitution, and possession of heroin. Later, at her arraignment, her lawyer would argue in her defense, saying she had no motive to kill Forrest, and that he was a lucrative source of money for her. She pled not guilty to everything, and her bail was set at $1.5 million. Her family supported her the whole way, in dark contrast to Forrest's family, who was oddly quiet. In fact, nobody in his life spoke out on his behalf. Furthermore, the prosecution said something unheard of in murder cases. His family didn't want her charged, but I think specifically they didn't want to go to trial. Because if it did go to trial, then the footage from the yacht would become public. But not only that, the footage from the last 6 months would be under the microscope. It seems the family didn't want any of Forrest's previous behavior to come to light. During the investigation, police discovered, just days before his death, Forrest had another woman aboard his yacht, and they did methadone before he passed out. The next morning, he called her, unaware of what happened the night before, and letting her know that he was okay. In light of all this, on May 19, 2015, a year and a half after his death, Alex pled guilty to involuntary manslaughter, prostitution, and possession charges to avoid going to trial. In a shocking twist, the prosecution didn't side with police on the interpretation of the footage that night on the yacht. Rather than seeing a cold, callous killer, they saw Alex panicked and in distress. But although she didn't kill Forrest intentionally, she never tried to save him or call for help. She received a sentence of 6 years in jail minus time served, and on March 29, 2017, she was released. But this is not the end of the story. Upon her release, she was turned over to immigration and lost her U.S. citizenship. In June, she did her first public interview.
Tried to portray to everyone that I'm some kind of serial killer. It's just dumb.
And 1 week later, the Georgia DA announced indictments of felony murder and providing drugs in relation to the death of her boyfriend, Dean Riapelli. After the news of her case in California, Georgia authorities reopened the case of Dean's death. Alex had claimed she found him unresponsive after he had been on a bender, drinking heavily and doing drugs. However, his nanny at the time said that he didn't do drugs or even drink. We will likely never know, because in order for Alex to face the charges, Canada would have to extradite her to Georgia, which is unlikely because in Georgia, for felony murder, she would face the death penalty. Canada doesn't extradite to territories where the death penalty is possible. Were the deaths of these men just accidents, the consequence of adults partaking in risky behavior, or something much worse, a callous woman who murdered when the opportunity presented itself? I'm inclined to believe they were accidental. Dean was living with and contemplating marriage with a heroin addict. It's not hard to imagine that he had a secret habit as well. And Forrest clearly engaged in risky behaviors with people he barely knew. After his death, it came out that he had drank alcohol and taken pills shortly before his encounter with Alex.
That hours before I got there, he had been drinking and been taking Valium. And though he seemed perfectly sober to me, if I had known both of those pieces of information that I know now, I would have never let him take the drugs.
Despite all of that, her Facebook messages about murder are definitely a red flag, considering she had just killed a man, whether intentional or not. The biggest victims in this case are the wife and children of the men involved. I can't imagine what Forrest's wife went through, discovering secret upon secret, and then topping it all off with the death of her husband. Let me know what you think about this case. I thought it was interesting. I don't think it was as nefarious as some of the other cases I've covered. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.